So, a key role of an enabler here, where India is reaching out to France as one of the prominent EU partners. There was no mention of Russia, Ukraine in that particular address, of course. So we're going to get some excerpts of the other reactions or bites of External Affairs Minister. But your opening remarks, Professor Singh.
Thank you, Sakal. I think there are multiple factors that make this relationship very special. After Brexit, for example, Britain is no longer the gateway for India to European Union. France is the new gateway to European Union. France is also not just strategic partner, but important defense supplier to India. And as you said, we'll discuss that soon after the initial remarks. But what is important is the national character of both India and France. France, as the foreign minister said in his speech at the International Relations Institute, has been very conscious of its autonomy even by staying within NATO, and same is India, so conscious of India's strategic autonomy. Sometimes experts call that just like in Europe, in North Atlantic, France has a special role to play. Some people think in Indo-Pacific, India is the France of Indo-Pacific, because we are also a very conscious country of ensuring our autonomy, our independence of foreign policy, taking decisions on merit. And that, I think, the character, which is a national character, really connects the two countries. And as a result, therefore, if you see the high-level visits between two countries, the regular communications, whether on phone or on sidelines of UN meeting or climate change meeting or bilateral meetings, regular interaction. Other than Britain, France has a distinction of being the only country where 5 times national leaders were invited as chief guests of India's Republic Day celebrations, which marks a kind of indication which way India's foreign policy is moving.
Okay.
France also holds distinction of being the only country whose soldiers have actually marched on India's Republic Day parade. Only country.
Yes.
So in multiple ways, it's a special relationship.
Franco-Indian relationship, in the words of Ambassador Kumar. Professor Singh, your take on it?
I think I agree with Ambassador Kumar. Clearly, France has not just the real estate in both Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. It shares its maritime boundaries, therefore, with 5 countries in Indian Ocean and 12 countries in the Pacific Ocean. So it is a resident power in the Indo-Pacific, and that becomes all the more significant because, for whatever reasons, for its autonomy or otherwise, France is not part of either the quadrilateral security dialogue, which is an important initiative in the region, and it is also not part of what is now called AUKUS, Australia, UK and US security mechanism, which was launched last September. So therefore, in a sense, France perhaps has this sense of finding its own connectivity with the region. And India is a large country which, is not an alliance partner with either Australia, Japan or United States, fits the bill therefore for direct partnership, and they have taken enormous initiatives on ocean governance. In fact, the 2 ministers have just signed the roadmap for blue economy and ocean governance, which is going to focus on a whole lot of issues of rule of law, sustainable, resilient coastal waterways, infrastructure, fisheries, ecotourism, naval industry. So they are finding each other really very attractive in building that autonomous relationship, which is not kind of bandwagoning.
Oh, that's a very critical point. Professor Singh, would you like to also comment on that?
Definitely. I think, as Ambassador just mentioned, the bandwidth of bilateral relationship has itself been expanding, and other than almost half a dozen areas that he just mentioned, you could also add very important sectors in pandemic now. Health, for example, education, research, innovation, all the way to sports, and then so many other areas are being added to the partnership. And then, of course, they also have partnership at various multilateral forums. And to top it all is at United Nations Security Council.
Yes, there was a mention of that as well.
India is a non-permanent member for the 8th time now, and the coordination that takes place in UNSC again is very significant. And of course, as presidency of EU is with France, again, in that context, again, France becomes a significant partner for India. So there are multiple new sectors and new mechanisms where India and France are actually working together in that sense. And I think that is because it's an unusual relationship. It's not a relationship which is driven by external or exogenous factors. These are driven by their own, character of the nation, their own requirements, their own national interests, and that brings them really closer together. And I think that has moved even within defense. It has moved to a whole range of sectors now, not just procurements, but also technology transfers in terms of joint production and others, which potentially areas of cooperation. So even within the limited bandwidth of defense security and strategic cooperation, there are new sectors which are being sort of explored to work together between India and France. So I think that is a kind of showcasing of how France then becomes an important pillar for India to sustain its strategic autonomy.
Yes.
Just like India becomes a pillar for France to stay on with its autonomy.
Yes. All right, so let me get some quick reactions from both our experts as far as how India would like to see the transition of relationship with Myanmar government there, the military, establishment there, and in the wake of remarks that have come from Dr. Jaishankar. Is there a dilemma? Because in contrast to the position that India took when the crisis was swelling in Myanmar.
See, there was a time when India had a clear position of standing by the democracy for several decades, until, as Ambassador just mentioned, our consciousness of our security concerns on the border and therefore our approach to the military junta made India also access and have certain communication with the ruling military junta there. And therefore, those issues have not disappeared completely. So just like several other important stakeholders in ensuring democracy returns in Myanmar, India has also stood by saying we support ASEAN 5-point consensus to be the mechanism within which the resolution of these the crisis in Myanmar should happen as soon as possible. But then there are multiple other mechanisms and places where India also keeps nudging. The most important, for example, the Human Rights Council has just come out with a report recommending to United Nations to take initiatives ensuring that no new military supplies should be made to the military junta in Myanmar, because those weapons are likely to be used against their own civilian citizens inside Myanmar. So there are multiple ways, and I think this is where even sitting in Europe, whether it is the Munich Security Conference or in Paris, the effort clearly is that too much focus on Ukraine should not mean that these important countries forget about what is happening in Afghanistan, what is happening in Myanmar, and what is happening in other important areas where they need to also pay attention.
Has India legitimized Taiwan? What is India's position on Ukraine? What is India's position on Vladimir Putin's constant statements about not talking something and then doing something reportedly? Professor Singh, how do you look at or perhaps analyze Dr. Jaishankar's statement or response to that question?
Let me add, other than their being located in very different geographical areas, having had very different history, the fundamental question of what is the Ukraine crisis and what is the issue of Taiwan is completely different. Ukraine is an issue of territoriality, whereas the issue of Taiwan is one of the national identity. The Communist Party was chasing the the ruling party, Kuomintang, which finally decided after running around the country to go to the island called Formosa, which is now called Taiwan. And for a long time, both sides continue to claim that they were real China. That's not at all the issue when it comes to Ukraine. Ukraine is an issue of a certain physical territory, which is where the problem is. Even when Ukraine is trying to seek NATO membership, that's nothing to change with its national identity or undermine Russian national identity. So two are completely, not just in the geographical areas, but two are completely different issues. There is hardly anything that matches between the two issues that are being compared.
So you're saying that this comparison is uncalled for by certain world powers?
Completely uncalled for. I think this is more to do with the great power diplomacy, great power equations, where some countries have issues with Russia and China coming together. and they want to insinuate things as if they are bargaining and they are sort of bartering territories with each other, which is not how countries operate in their relationship.
Okay.
There is no doubt that Russia, China are coming closer, but that doesn't make these two issues similar.
Okay, okay. Well, so we had to negotiate a lot with Pakistan. You know, that point came up in that as a response to that question. Professor Singh, and then I'll go to Ambassador Kumar.
Pakistan, particularly after its bifurcation, has tried to use Afghanistan as a strategic depth and a bridge to connect to West Asia and Central Asia. So it has a reason why over time it helped in rising of Mujahideen and then later creation of Taliban. But it has boomeranged now. If you see the border skirmishes between Taliban's Afghanistan and Pakistan, Pakistan attacking across the border, talking of centuries of TPP, which is Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or some other outfits that they blame to be having sanctuaries inside Afghanistan, creates a very different, tense equation. Whereas India was seen as an infrastructure building country, almost 3 billion invested, almost another 2 billion promised in future. Unusual engagement India had with Afghanistan, and that is simply because we have had historical relationship, one community. In 1979, there used to be 8 to 10,000 Sikhs in Afghanistan. They are today reduced to 700 Sikhs in Afghanistan. Where have they gone? Most of them have come to India and some other, maybe very few in other English-speaking countries. A lot of Afghan refugees are in India. India provides them so many scholarships and trainings and building of institutions there, etc. So that is a very different relationship that India has had as a country that is going to build infrastructure, people's welfare and earn goodwill, and Pakistan kind of helping them in terms of building of Taliban and ensuring that American forces are removed from there. But the good news is that India has successfully been able to work through with Pakistan. Earlier we were supplying medicines, etc. through Tehran. For the first time, we are now using overland route through Pakistan. And the first convoy has gone yesterday.
All right.
And I think we'll have many more convoys to go through Pakistan.
Sir. Right, sir. So I need to wrap it up here, but I cannot leave both of you, distinguished voices in international relations, without taking your take on India's position vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia separately. The kind of statements coming from both the heads of states, particularly Russia, where Putin seems to be hinting, or rather talking back in a very threatening tone, that there could be serious consequences. First of all, Professor Singh, do you agree? And if that happens, how critical is that going to be?
I think West should have learned lessons, and if you look at how Russia operates, or earlier Soviet Union operates, right from 1979 intervention, as Ambassador used the word very consciously, in Afghanistan. Of course, more recently you can take cases of Moldova, Georgia, Crimea, and now these two people's republics in eastern Ukraine. This is how typically Russia has always operated, and very often has been successful in that sense. But what is important here is to underline that India has decided to move from non-alignment to multi-alignments to build partnerships with as many countries as possible in as many sectors. Now that has advantages but also costs. So both Russia and United States today want India to clearly endorse their positions, because India's voice today matters in international community. India also is seen as an important market partner by both these states, but India wants to continuously push that nuanced neutral position and saying we want to see restraint on use of force, we want to see dialogue taking place. But what is very interesting, Sakal, here is India is the only country. China, speaking in UN Security Council the other day, said exactly same language as India did. In Europe, France is talking of Europeans should look at European solutions, not towing the American line.
Okay.
Many smaller countries in Europe are saying Putin's security concerns are genuine. So India is not the only country which is, kind of taking that fine line of not taking clear sides. And therefore, I think India would be able to withstand some of these uncomfortable feelings that some of the two partners of India, United States and Russia, may have over a period of time.
Thank you very much. Really such an honor to talk to both of you, having an insight on multilateral issues, wide range of issues. Thank you very much.